Hi everyone, we'd like to welcome you today. We are celebrating Women's History Month here at the University of Mount Olive. My name is LaToya Lindsey, I'm the Associate Athletic Director, and I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate Women's History Month than with some icons we have here at the University of Mount Olive. So I am joined today by our head women's basketball coach, Wendy Lee, and also our faculty athletics representative, Dr. Brenda Cates. And so I actually was thinking about this, y'all, and between the three of us, it's probably like 70 years of experience at UMO. I don't know, I was right. So I was thinking, I was like, between your time here, my time here, your time, I think we're 65, I don't know, we have a lot of years experience here at UMO, so I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate Women's History Month than with these two ladies that I have here. So I guess just to give you all a little bit on, when I think of Women's History Month, I was like, who are some of the women that influenced me over the years? And I think about my family, of course, and my grandma comes to mind, Allie Gray Green. She's and thank God she's still around. I haven't seen her for a year because of COVID. I just haven't been able to actually go see her. But she was just that strong backbone in my family. Tell you what's on her mind. Tell you if the person you're dating, she didn't like them or not. Let you know, you're gaining a little bit of weight. That was just my grandma. That was just, but she's that woman when I think of just women's history, not even the athletic part of it, just with women in my family. She's the one that's really that backbone for my family. But I come from a family of very strong women, a lot of female cousins, a lot of aunts, and they just very strong women, and that's just who they are. But then on the athletic side, I know we have some other things when it comes to that. So when you all think of those women and your women's history in the background, what are some of the things that come to your mind? Either one.
Well, I will go ahead and just start and talk a little bit about, what woman particularly has influenced my life, but then also talk about how I've seen things change for women athletes through the years, from when my time involved as a student athlete in high school, how things have changed quite a bit over the years and what we see now. So the one woman who really was a key influence in my life, very similarly to you, was my mother. My mother grew up on a farm in rural Minnesota in the 20s and 30s. So tells you how old I am as well, I guess. But, her life growing up, it wasn't a hard life. They lived on a farm. They obviously worked it. But if you grew up during that time, you grew up being very independent and being very resilient.
Right.
And I know she would tell me when she was going to school as a elementary age student, she would cross-country ski to school in the wintertime.
Oh, wow.
Because it was the only way you could get there.
Right.
And they had to have individuals in town that they were responsible. If a blizzard came up, they knew whose house they needed to go to, and that's where they had to stay until they could get back home. And there were no phones. You couldn't call mom and tell her, well, I'm going over to the Anderson's house and this is where I'll be till the blizzard goes away. So, I mean, that upbringing, she was a very, very independent woman and very, very resilient. And then, of course, I tell my honors class here, my mother was the same age that my senior honor students are when World War II broke out. And she was engaged to marry a young man from Minnesota, and he was actually killed by a kamikaze raid on the ship he was stationed on in the South Pacific. So, she dealt with that hardship and dealt with that tragedy in the way she knew how. She joined the Waves. She joined the Women's Naval Auxiliary branch and served in that. And coming from Minnesota, she went to New York for her boot camp, and then from there she went to Dublin, Georgia, and was stationed at a naval hospital, and that's where she met my dad. Nice. So my mother has never shied away from just being open to doing new things. Trying new things, but like you said, very strong woman, very independent, very resilient, and I feel like that, I learned those. I learned those things. I not really learned them, but just by example, and just growing up. She had she was very active in the community, and she felt like if you committed to something, you committed to it. You didn't quit. You were never a quitter. And she had a lot of respect, and she would tell you, respect is earned.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can buy. You know, you can't make people respect you.
Right.
It's something that is earned. So
Yeah.
I think some of those characteristics are really what have influenced me
Yeah.
quite a bit with some of the decisions and the choices that I've made. So
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to
Yeah.
Wendy. We'll come
Right.
back and talk about sports in just a few
Right,
minutes.
right.
Well, I think all that you just said influenced you as an athlete, because you were, an avid tennis player and played sports, and I'm thinking everything you learned from your mom and your dad and your family instilled those values in you. And you're just saying resilience and you don't quit, and she showed you that through her life. She
Right.
didn't have to be an athlete herself and play sports, but all of those character
Right.
things you watched and saw through example made you a great athlete.
Right.
And
And
I
those are
would
things
say
that's instilled in you.
it
That's
is,
just
and
who
for you
are.
too, because you played softball in
Yeah.
college, and
Yeah.
your grandma from knee high up
Yeah.
made you be tough
Right.
and really speak your mind and
Yep.
stand up for yourself and those things. So for me, the same way. And the only thing I would say that, as far as my mom being a great example and my grandmother growing up through the early Depression, and, my grandma never threw anything away. She was just extremely conscious of valuing what you have and appreciating what you have and not taking things for granted, and
Right.
don't waste and don't, those things. So I feel like I got a little of that from my grandma, and then my mom was always like, and maybe our church too, whatever you do it with all your heart.
Right.
So at an early age, even if I'm, just playing outside with my brother, I want to do it and do it right. I want to win. Or if we're in the garden, I want to be sure I picked all the right butter beans and get the right ones, not the ones that were too young. It's like everything I was really like wanting to do it right. And I grew up on a farm. So we grew tobacco, and it was really a very humbling type of childhood where we had things, never felt like we didn't have things, but we worked hard.
Right.
And so for me as a young athlete, after I grew up working hard for my family, and because that's what you're supposed to do, I just thought it was second nature as an athlete. You're supposed to work hard. Like, you shouldn't have to make me work hard.
Right.
And appreciate what you have, and don't take for granted, and don't waste. And so I think really my family and my mom, I'd say the thing that my mom that stood out to me is being extremely kind-hearted, but also she had enough discipline about her where you wouldn't take advantage of her kindness.
Right.
You did what you should do, and she
Yeah.
had a kindness about her and a servant's heart. She would do for others. So I just thought, you work hard, but you're not just working hard for yourself. Most of what she would do was sewing something for somebody else, fixing a dress, fixing somebody's hair, doing all the things. It was always what she was doing, she did really well, but it was usually for somebody else.
Right.
So I think I kind of just saw that growing up, and I want to do for others. I want to do my best, and those were in non-athletic experiences that help influence me, I think, as a woman in sports.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we
let's
can
talk
come
about
back
that.
to it
Well, no,
another.
let's do that.
Woman
Let's-
in
yeah,
sports.
let's talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit. Just
for
the,
you, who
the
was
women
that?
in sports and what that means. And I think about that so much, and I know we were having the conversation about, and you will talk about it probably a little bit, about the males in your life in comparison to the females just at that time. But for me, I think about my high school softball coach, Debbie Filio, which I think you're familiar
I do.
with her. So, of course, when you're 15, 16 years old, you're not really thinking about the influential people. You're just like,
That's
I'm a
right.
teenager, I'm playing, okay, no big deal. But I really think back to my high school softball coach that was just present with us. And she was, we were a bad team, don't get me wrong. We were not a good team.
We were bad.
We
Not
were,
bad,
we
like,
were,
we
yeah,
were bad.
no, not bad like in a good
We
way.
were
We were
bad.
not very good. However, she still motivated us. She
Yeah.
still encouraged us. And it wasn't like, okay, yeah, we may win a handful of games, but let's make it the best experience. Let's,
Yeah.
let's put forth and let's, make sure that you're trying hard. But when I really think about influential, those sports icons or, the people in athletics, I definitely think it's my high school softball coach. Because I had a male coach in college, but I definitely think my high school coach was very influential for me. Yeah.
Right. Well, my athletics started in 7th grade because when I was growing up, you really didn't have the recreational teams that you have now and the leagues and all of those things outside of school. You either played at school or you didn't play on a team at all. So middle school, the only sport that was available for girls at that time was basketball. And that would have been the mid-70s. So when I went to high school, I started high school just about the time that Title IX went into effect. And so from my freshman year in high school, where I think basketball and track were the only sports for girls at that time, by my sophomore year we had tennis, we had softball, we had really added some sports that our girls could participate in. So I played tennis and basketball. Those were my favorite sports, I'll put it that way. But I did track, I did softball, but they were just kind of things I did in the spring so I didn't have to ride the bus home.
Right.
So with tennis, I will never forget we started that my sophomore year, and the coach came out, and Sherman Frederick, loved him, he's passed on now. But he's just very, very imposing, towering African-American male. He was a basketball coach. How they talked to this man into coaching a bunch of giggly 15-year-olds who wanted to learn how to play tennis, I do not know. But he came out the first day and he said, I don't know anything about tennis, but I do know how to teach you to think like a winner. And he said, if you'll hang with me, we're going to learn how to play tennis together, but I'm going to teach you how to be a winner in this game and in life. And I will never forget that. I actually did. He was also my math teacher, so I dedicated my dissertation to him years later. Just amazing man. But most of my coaches that I had through high school were males. We had some female coaches, but they just weren't in the sports that I tended to gravitate to. But still very meaningful individuals in my life, and just taught me a lot of good things that I could carry on. And then I was telling them earlier, when I went to Carolina as a freshman, my sophomore year was the first year, and I think everybody knows the long-standing history of UNC's women's soccer program, but to see how things have changed, my sophomore year was the first year that women's soccer began at UNC, and Anson Dorrance was the coach then. And he literally was posting flyers around campus for women who were at the college. Just come show up. Just, be a part of the team. Everybody was a walk-on then. Can you imagine that now? UNC women's soccer, everybody is a walk-on that first year. So to see where things were and to see the opportunities that our female student athletes have today, it's amazing to see how things have grown. When I was growing up, probably about the only sport you could see on TV that involved women athletes were tennis, the major tennis tournaments. And I would watch Wimbledon and watch the U.S. Open, and because I love tennis. And, I coached tennis here at the college when we first went to a 4-year program. We were NAIA.
Which I'm sure a lot of people probably don't know that.
They probably don't know that.
I was a
tennis coach. So, it's been amazing to see the sports that we've grown, the opportunities that we have for our female student athletes. And Wendy, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes as well.
In the basketball world.
In the basketball world.
I was thinking as you were saying that about Carolina and the development of their sports program with soccer and how it just escalated to be just a national powerhouse, and that's where people want to go, to play soccer and everything. And to me, I think probably as an early athlete, it was Tennessee and it was Pat Summitt, and it was like the Lady Balls, and she was just so passionate as a women's basketball coach, and she was a female athlete that had to go to college without a scholarship. They only had men's basketball scholarships, so her family paid for her to go to college, and she played basketball because she had loved it. So it's like, that era of athletes and coaches to me influenced me. Pat Summitt, Sylvia Hatchell, Kay Yao, they were the women's basketball pioneer coaches that really, when you started hearing about women's basketball being on TV, was probably in the 80s because they didn't have an NCAA tournament until the 80s.
Yeah.
And that was when they were coaches. They were young, really young coaches. So it was like, for me, I like to know, like Pat Summit was a basketball player before it was really cool to be a basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
She did it when it was kind of really not cool, probably,
Yeah.
because female athletes could have stereotypes,
Right.
and females playing sports may not be really okay with some people. And so she did it anyway because she loved it and didn't worry about those things, and all the other coaches I just mentioned. So they were a women's basketball coach when maybe it wasn't the ideal job in some people's minds to be a basketball coach,
Yeah.
whatever, as a female, you know.
Right.
And so they broke through that, and they made where they were special, like Anson did for Carolina basketball. When you think of Tennessee, you know if you want to go to Tennessee, it's because they had that winning history and their
Yeah.
tradition, but somebody had to start that.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, so these people were winners before they became winners.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and they made Tennessee, and Carolina, and NC State. So now when people want to go there, it wasn't always that way.
Right.
You know, it's like
Right.
they used to have people walk on to be on their team.
Right.
People had to put in hard work and play when you didn't get money to play for your scholarship, and you only had one uniform. And you know, I even read things about Pat Summit said that they had multiple games, and like they wore the same uniforms the next day and didn't wash them. They're like, we only had one set of uniforms. And
Right,
we didn't
right.
have hotels,
Yeah.
but they loved it. They
Yeah.
never worried about that, and they
Yeah.
valued that. And it was just, to me, it's like they just had, and watching her coach, it was kind of like, sometimes, you know, for females, it's been thought of that, you know, to be intense is not really ladylike,
Mhm.
but she
Right,
just
right.
coached with passion
Yeah.
and made it okay to be intense as
Right.
a woman on the sidelines or whatever. And she had to break through all those, not just her, but during that era, all those female coaches in
Yeah.
every sport had to block out what people thought about them, and what people says is okay for a female to
Right,
do, and
right.
to play sports or to be a coach, and to be intense,
Yeah.
and it not be something wrong with that, you know. So for me, I feel like, you know, I've taken that on as just, I don't even think about how I look on the sidelines. I don't care about that.
Right.
I want you to do your best, and I'm going to be intense, and I'm going to try to get the best from you and do the best for you. And they laid the way for that to be okay, though.
Right.
You know, they
Yeah.
did those things
Yeah.
for us to now have the freedom to be ourselves and
Yeah.
not feel like we have to be something other than who we are,
Right.
and do what you do and love what you do.
So you are, I don't know if you got some ESP stuff going on, but you
Really?
are like in my brain, because that was gonna literally be kind of what would I leave for our female student athletes? You know, what would I say to them? And it is exactly,
Yeah.
be comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
Be okay with being who you are. You know, there's nothing wrong with you being Brenda, with you being Wendy, with me being LaToya. But I think that's exactly, I mean, exactly what you just said is exactly what
Yeah.
what I was thinking before. Just that is something that I would want to say to our female student athletes. Just being okay with being who you are, being comfortable in your
And
own
I think
skin.
it's important too, because we are celebrating Women's History
Mhm.
Month, is just to understand, just like Wendy said, Pat Summit and some of those pioneers
Right.
who just paved the way for the opportunities
Yeah.
that are there now that we don't even think about.
Nope.
You know, we take for granted, I think, many of the things that we have at our disposal as far as
Absolutely.
careers we can go
Yeah.
into. And opportunities in sports careers that weren't there before. Some of those things that these pioneers have paved the
Right.
way for, and be appreciative of that.
Yeah.
You know, if I could go back and just, you know, take something that from my mom, you know, be committed. If you commit to something,
Yeah.
you know, give it your all and take responsibility for your actions.
Right.
Yeah.
Be appreciative of the opportunities that you have, and like you said with your family, work
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that, I think we all three have that as part of our upbringing, is that
That's
we were
right.
taught that if
Yeah.
you were gonna do something, do it well.
Absolutely.
And do it hard, work hard, give 100%, and it's what we want to see for our female student, what we want to see for all of our
Right,
student
right,
athletes.
right.
Our
But as we
female
celebrate
student
Women's History
athletes,
Month,
but as
right.
we celebrate
Yeah.
that,
Mhm.
just know that those opportunities are out there,
Yeah.
and even beyond life at UMO.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? How do you take those skills that you've learned as a student athlete and then project them and use those as you move forward through life? And
Yeah.
the sky's the limit.
Right.
You know, you can be whatever you want to be as long as you're
Yes.
working for it. So,
Right. Yep.
I mean, I just sum it all up too with agreeing with everything that you said. And, you know, I even said to our team today after a workout that I'd seen something that just made me think. And it was like, the way you do anything should be the way you do everything. And that means like everything you're doing, you should have a high standard of excellence with it. And that would be like all in. Do
Yeah.
everything with all your heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Work hard. Sprint work, weight room, on the court. Write your best paper. You know, if we got to come in here and clean the gym up, let's get it done. Let's do
Yeah.
it fast. Let's do it
Yeah.
well. Don't
Right.
leave little stuff that you don't think somebody's going to see. And just anything you do should be how you should do everything that way.
Right.
So how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
Do you do some stuff really well because you like it, and then the other stuff you just halfway do it? Well, that's really who you are.
Yeah.
You know, because then when it gets really tough, that's what you're going to resort to. And so, you know, when I leave a locker room on the road or even in hours, and I think I got this from my mom, I'm looking around to make sure everything's in place and cleaning up trash. I want it to look good when we leave it. Our place, their place. So it's like, even that's important. So we've got, anything we do should be how we do everything.
Absolutely.
I don't know, I would want our athletes, all of them, but female athletes, to feel like, you know, the sky's the limit. There is no boundaries. Really, any boundary you have is ones that you set. And any time you feel inferior is if you allow somebody to make you feel inferior.
Right.
It's you.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't blame other people. Like, I don't like for people to make excuses and to blame. And there are no boundaries. You're not inferior to a male or a female or this race, that you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. So don't feel that way. You're allowing yourself to feel that way. So, you know, the sky's the limit, and give it your heart, and put everything you got into whatever you're doing right now, and make A's. Don't be okay with C's.
Right.
I mean, you know,
Right. Yeah.
high standards of excellence,
Yeah.
I think, will help our athletes when they leave from here to be successful with their
Right.
families and in
Yeah.
relationships and with their next job and after sports,
Yeah.
because you're not going to be women in sports forever. You're going to be women in life now,
Right.
and you're going to have a woman with a family
Yeah.
and a job, and
Right.
that, I want you to take what you leave from Mount Olive and apply it to your life, not just sports.
Yeah.
But sports, I think at an early age, taught me a lot of those lessons
Yeah.
in family and
Yeah.
things that now, if I'm not coaching, I'll be whatever the next thing is. If I have another career, I want to be great at that. I want to have a high standard of excellence and do it with all my heart. And it won't be just because I put all my heart into basketball because I love basketball. I approach sitting down with you that way or writing a paper that way. It's not just because I love basketball that I go hard at it. It's a standard that I want to have in everything.
Right. Yeah. You know, I feel like we could sit here probably 30 more minutes. Like, oh, and I have worked with y'all so many years. It's like, I didn't know that about your mom. I didn't know this great information.
Yeah.
Just really good information.
We should talk more.
I know. This was really good.
Good
Thank you
talk.
for that. And hopefully just something that was said can inspire some, not only our female student athletes, but students overall. I will say that I think UMO is very fortunate to have you two ladies part of our staff. I will say that. I definitely think so.
Thank you.
So again, thanks to our fabulous athletics representative, Dr. Brenda Cates, and our head women's basketball coach, Wendy Lee, for just sitting down and chatting with me today. And happy Women's History Month from the University of Mount Olive.